Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 26 Series Rescue the Rockies. And our Rockies are once again world champions here in the 2037 season, taking out the Las Vegas Athletics 4-1 in the World Series. Ended up being a very good year for our Rockies, obviously at 108-54, had the best record in all of baseball. And when we take a look at our team statistics, we were an absolutely dominant team, first in the National League in runs scored, and we led the league in almost every hitting category, led the league in steals, good base running team, first in zone rating, second in defensive efficiency, and first or second in all of the major pitching categories. So was a fantastic season on our way to a 108-54 record, and of course 11 more wins in the postseason. And with that, we turn the page to the 2037 to 2038 offseason, our annual roster review, as we check in on how everybody did this season and start thinking through some of the decisions we have ahead of us this offseason. And before we check in on all of our healthy players, we will check in on the ones who ended the year on the injured list. Noah Schultz, our longtime ace, and then more recently our number 2 starter, only pitched 3 games for us this year after we signed him to a 3-year extension. 1-0 record with a 1.80 ERA, but he is 34 years old now. Who knows how he's going to look at the other side of this injury. Still got about a month left to recover from that torn flexor tendon in his elbow. Fortunately, we did front load that 3-year contract a bit, but he's still going to be making $25 million a year for the next couple seasons. Hopefully we can still have him penciled in as our number 2 starter for next year. Kikaku Kawakami tore an elbow ligament on Halloween. Ended up missing the end of the World Series. As a rookie, he was 5-1 with a 3.83 ERA, slightly above replacement level, a more than respectable season for him. Unfortunately, with that torn elbow ligament, he's going to miss all of next year. This was his final option season, but since presumably he'll be on the 60-day IL next year, we'll probably just pay him his major league minimum salary, punt on next season, and see what he looks like next offseason and whether we may still have a spot for him in the future. Mike Girard has not played since April of 2036, so he missed all of this year, had a setback from his recovery of that torn PCL in his knee. Still looks like he is an outstanding defensive catcher, but our expectation is that the bat has taken a step backwards. Girard is set to make about $6 million in arbitration next year. Not going to be inconceivable that he'll come back from that injury wrecked, given that he has played only 71 games in the majors over the last 3 seasons, and he's going to be set to be making $6 million next year. Could be an interesting decision for us. We still love his glove, but it definitely seems like the bat has taken a step backwards. He was a supplemental first-round pick of ours in 2029. We had a lot of big hopes for him with that glove and a bat that does have some pop to it with 32 homers and 115 ribbies and 675 at-bats. But unfortunately, he'll be 27 years old before he plays another major league game. And he's only played a little over 200 games in his career, and again hasn't played in almost 2 full seasons at this point. And last but not least is a guy who we think could be a very strong Rookie of the Year candidate, Mike Castro, our first-round pick from 2034 out of southeastern Louisiana. Fractured his wrist during the playoffs, unfortunately, but he had a monster rookie season for us, leading the American League or the National League with 624 at-bats, 127 runs, and 183 hits. Also had a total of 66 extra base hits, including 47 doubles, stole 38 bases for us. All in all, put up a 124 WRC plus and a 4.7 WAR. He should be fully recovered from that fractured wrist by the beginning of next season, and would certainly anticipate Castro to be our everyday left fielder next year, and likely our leadoff hitter once again, at least against right-handed pitching, given that he is even somewhat more productive in terms of his eye and his ability to make contact against lefties. It's not inconceivable that he could end up batting second or third for us against left-handed pitching, but certainly will be somewhere near the top of the order next year. And with our discussions of the injured players over, we'll turn our attention to our outstanding pitching staff, which of course could be even better next year if Schultz comes back, pretty similar to what he's been in the past. Leo Martinez, who is at this point a 3-time defending Cy Young Award winner, probably won't win the Cy Young Award this year after going 12-4 with a 3.17 ERA. Did still lead the league in WHIP and walks per 9 innings while putting up a 5.8 WAR. And after a relatively slow start to the season, 3.51 ERA in April, 4.54 in May, and 5.33 in June. He was absolutely dominant over the second half of the year. In July, August, and September, he went a combined 8-1 with an ERA in the low 2s over those 3 months. So certainly still expecting Martinez to be a very important pitcher at the top of our rotation again next year. Bob Russell, who we picked up in a big trade with Atlanta last offseason, filled in well as our number 2 starter for most of this year, even though we had expected him to be our 3 starter. Led the National League with 16 wins against 10 losses, 3.63 ERA, and a 4.4 WAR on the year. Outstanding season for Russell. The lefty starting to make a little bit of money, set to make almost $5 million next year, but certainly will bring him back at that price. Aaron Bell, much better in his second year in Colorado than his first. 12-2 record this year with a 3.88 ERA and a 3.4 WAR. Bell is set to make $7 million next year. With his profile, definitely more of a 4th or 5th starter than a number 3 starter, which is where he was for us this year. So from that perspective, if we get Schultz back and can shift Bell down in the rotation, that would certainly help. Bernie Barrera, scouting discovery from back in 2028, so almost a decade ago at this point, 13-8 with a 3.93 ERA. Spent most of this year as our 4th starter due to the injuries and put up a 3.7 WAR. Barrera has come a pretty solid pitcher for us, putting up a WAR of over 2 for 4 consecutive seasons, while he's either been a full-time or a part-time starter for us. Right now he is penciled in as our number 5 starter for next year. And David Guidron was our number 5 starter for much of this year. Ended up starting 20 of the 24 games that he pitched in. 7-3 record with an excellent 2.91 ERA. Struck out almost a batter per inning for us and put up a 3 WAR. The first-round pick, supplemental first-round pick back in 2035, is a rare occurrence for us in this playthrough as a early-round college pitcher who's actually worked out. Guidron definitely doesn't look like he's going to be an ace, but certainly would expect him to be a long reliever out of the bullpen for us, perhaps a lefty specialist at times. And if we do have some injuries or ineffectiveness in the rotation, he certainly could get the opportunity to start more games next year. We'll turn now to our outstanding bullpen, and the back end of our bullpen is incredible. The 4 pitchers who are generally pitching the late innings for us. You could argue that our closer, the lefty Adonis Valer, is the worst of those 4. 2-7 record this year with 46 saves, 3.80 ERA, almost 13 strikeouts per 9 innings. Did give up 11 home runs in just 66 and a third innings, though, and you can see was only about half a run above replacement level. Valère set to make $7 million next year before some team options at the end of the extension we gave him kick in. Certainly will be pitching in the late innings for us, but it's possible that he could lose the closer role at some point, although he's done well in that. Justin Gibson, who we signed to an extension a couple of years ago, made $15 million this year, set to make $15 million next year, and then he'll have a player option. Gibson has a pretty incredible streak at this point. He's led the league in games pitched for 6 straight years, and he's led the league in holds for 7 straight years. 14-6 working out of the bullpen this year. 33 shutdowns, which is generally a number that he's usually around. 120 strikeouts in 90 innings pitched, although he did give up 14 home runs. Long ball has become an issue for him a bit over these past few years, but ultimately still put up a 1.7 WAR for us, pitching some pretty important late innings as a setup man / stopper for us. Josh Joss, another righty, the 25-year-old, 3-5 for us with a 2.57 ERA, 67 strikeouts over 56 innings pitched. He did allow just 3 home runs for us, so he put up a WAR of 1.6, 170 ERA plus, and a 55 FIP minus for the outstanding young pitcher who we signed to a very reasonable extension about a year and a half ago. And arguably the best of these 4 pitchers is Chris Kennedy. Last year he earned the Mariano Rivera Award, 8-1 record with 3 saves this year, 28 shutdowns to 11 meltdowns. His ERA climbed to 2.55, and he did give up a rather unimpressive 13 home runs in 84 2/3 innings. But he had a ridiculous 15 strikeouts per 9 innings and a perhaps even more ridiculous strikeout to walk ratio of almost 13-1 on his way to put up a 2.7 WAR for us this year. Rich Hannon is certainly a respectable reliever, but he's a guy who's set to make about $3.5 million next year. 3-1 record with a 3.89 ERA. Another guy who struck out more than a batter per inning. Gave up too many home runs, though. He was basically a replacement level player. With the money he is set to make and the fact that we do have some interesting pitchers in AAA, I can't guarantee that Hannon will be back with us next year. That's a decision we need to make. Part of the reason we could move on from Hannon is we do have Melvin Reyes, 24-year-old. Like his profile, durable reliever who was an international free agent signing back in 2031. That said, he had a very rough introduction to the major leagues. 4-2 record, but only 2 shutdowns to 7 meltdowns, an ERA in the mid-6s with 19 walks in just 33 2/3 innings. When all was said and done, though, he was still a replacement level player. 68 ERA plus is obviously ugly. The 105 FIP minus is not that bad, however, and his SIERA was almost 2.5 runs better than his ERA. So still hopeful that Reyes becomes a good reliever for us down the line. Jeff Colson, still waiting on that shoulder injury. Whether he ends up out for an extended period of time like Kawakami will be an important thing for us to hopefully figure out in the next few days. Colson, who was our first-round pick back in 2032, made his major league debut this year, pitched in 20 games, including 7 starts, 3-1 record with a 3.71 earned run average, 11 home runs in 60 2/3 innings, another guy who definitely struggled to keep the ball in the park. He was basically a replacement level pitcher at the age of 23 when all was said and done. And then we've got a decision with our former closer, Wellington Herrera, the lefty 2-1 this year with a fine 2.96 ERA. But he was a lefty specialist, pitched just 24 and a third innings for us over 44 games, slightly above replacement level, set to make $5 million next year with a team option. Unwilling to waive the no-trade clause he has by virtue of his 10-5 rights. His stuff is now below average, control below average. He is very good against lefties, so certainly could be a lefty specialist for us next year. We do potentially have Russell, Guadrone, and Schultz as lefties who would either be in the rotation or, in the case of Guadrone, possibly in the bullpen. Donis Valer, another lefty, but right now Herrera is the only other lefty out of the bullpen, which could encourage us to consider bringing him back. That said, we do have 3 lefties in AAA, some of whom could potentially help us in the bullpen also, which could encourage us to move on from Herrera, who, as I mentioned, was our closer before. He is a guy who has been part of this organization since this playthrough started, although he didn't make it into the majors until 2027. You can see he had a nice 7-year run as our closer with 30 saves in 7 consecutive years. The last couple years he's been more of a lefty specialist for us, and $5 million for 34 years old next year with the profile that he has, definitely getting questionable as to whether we want to bring him back at that price. We'll turn our attention now to our position players who were, like our pitchers, very strong. The one thing we know for sure is that the lefty hitting catcher J.D. Lee will be back as our starter next year. He had a much better year than we ever anticipated, hitting .337, 18 homers, 85 ribbies, put up a 6.2 WAR, probably will get some most valuable player votes. He's not as good defensively as either Mr. Gerard, who we talked about, or Mr. Harris, who we'll be talking about shortly. But the pitching staff obviously still did extremely well with J.D. Lee behind the plate. And as a lefty, he is a very effective hitter against right-handed pitching, which is how we played him this year. He platooned with Nate Harris, who, like Gerard, is a right-handed hitter. Harris, like Gerard, is very good defensively, although not quite as elite as Gerard is. Guy who is a competent-ish major league hitter. Hit .240 this year with 5 homers and 18 ribbies and 204 at-bats, 84 WRC plus. That's kind of what he is, only slightly above replacement level this year. Harris is better against left-handed pitching than he is against right-handed pitching. He's set to make a little less than $2 million next year. Hard to foresee a scenario where we would have Lee, Harris, and Gerard all on the roster. So ultimately think we probably need to decide whether we want to be platooning Harris or Gerard with Lee, and then look to see if we can get anything in trade for the other catcher that we decide to move on from. We'll have Jorge Tapia, 15th round pick from 2030, who made his major league debut at the end of this year, going 0 for 9 in 3 games played. In AAA next year, still has 2 option years left, with the fact that we'll likely be moving on from either Harris or Gerard. The thought would be that Tapia probably will be our 3rd outfielder, spend the year in AAA, and join us in the majors if we have an injury and need some help. Turning now to our infielders, one thing that we're pretty confident on is that Ryan Stone will be back as our first baseman. The lefty has been a platoon player for us throughout his career, still a very productive bat against right-handed pitching, and a well below average bat against left-handed pitching. Lost a little power this year. His home runs were more than cut in half from 27 to 12. Still had some pop in his bat, though, with 40 doubles, 8 triples, stole 13 bases. When all was said and done, he hit 291 with an 811 OPS, 118 WRC plus, and a 2.1 WAR. The former first-round pick out of UVA will be turning 32 next season, $8 million, and then we get into some team options towards the end of that contract we signed him to when he was just a young pup. Stone has been a very consistent player for us over the years, but probably is in the beginning of the inevitable decline that everybody goes through. But he has been a member of all 6 of our World Series championship teams, 2-time All-Star, and he has been the MVP in 3 playoff series for us over the years. Manuel Torres is a player who's come up through our organization, former 10th round pick. Out of options at this point. We've waived and DFA'd him a number of times over the past season. Always made it down to AAA. Split the year between AAA Albuquerque and the majors. Was pretty good, 283 with 3 homers and 8 ribbies and 60 at-bats. So he put up a 131 WRC plus for us in the majors a year after he put up a 149 for us. The right-hander is pretty good against left-handed pitching. Not a particularly good defensive player, but he's got that captain personality, good influence in the clubhouse, and as I noted, a solid bat against lefties. So if we can continue to move him back and forth between the majors and AAA and nobody picks him up when we waive and DFA him, likely we'll continue to have him in the organization. Johnny Castillo is international free agent signing of ours from 2032, who, like Mike Castro, who we talked about earlier, is an extremely strong candidate for Rookie of the Year. Tied for the National League lead with 38 homers, also scored over 100 runs, drove in over 100 runs, ultimately put up a 130 WRC plus and a 4.3 WAR. He is not a great defensive infielder, but he played second base for us this year. Taking a look at his fielding status, his fielding stats, zone rating and defensive efficiency were both a little bit below average for a second baseman, but if he continues to put up a 130 WRC plus and lead the league in home runs, I think we will happily deal with the fact that he is just an adequate defensive infielder. We are in a situation where, with Stone back as our first baseman and Castillo back as our second baseman, we could start having some decisions to make with some of our veteran infielders. One of them is Rosniel DePaula, who was a guy who only started for us this year against left-handed pitching. A versatile player who can play second or third for us in shortstop in a pinch. But he hit only 228 this year with 4 homers and 25 ribbies. No longer an everyday player for us just by virtue of wanting to get Castillo those at-bats, which he made the most of. 78 WRC plus is ugly. Only half a win above replacement. He's now 29 years old, fragile physically. And DePaula set to make over $8 million next year. So he's a guy who I think we have to at least consider moving on from in a trade. Part of the reason we could consider moving on from him is that we've got Trent Kaysen around, the 25-year-old, still going to be making the major league minimum next year. He hit 259 with 10 homers and 54 ribbies and 332 at-bats for us this year. 110 WRC plus, 2.2 WAR. Another guy who can play all over the infield. And he's certainly significantly cheaper than Rosniel DePaula at this point and also healthier than him. And we could say the same thing about Derby Mahez. It's hard to imagine that both DePaula and Mahez will be back with us next year. Mahez, a former first-round pick out of UCLA, like DePaula, is fragile physically. He'll be 29 years old in a little over a month. And he had a rough year offensively. His batting average fell to 218. It's dropped from 273 to 243 to 218 over the past 3 years. 17 homers and 59 ribbies and 418 at-bats. Did steal 22 bases, but an 85 WRC plus and a 2.3 WAR. Looked like Mahez may have peaked a couple of years ago as far as his major league ability. As I noted, he's going to be 29 years old next year, and Mahez set to be making over $7 million next season. So given that, as I said, we've got first and second taken with Stone and Castillo, we've got Kaysen, who can definitely start for us at third base. With the numbers that DePaula and Mahez are both looking to make next year, it's not inconceivable that we could move on from one or perhaps even both of them. Jarrett Woods is a guy who made his major league debut in the playoffs for us. Had 399 at-bats, 27 doubles, 2 triples, 14 homers in AAA this year, where he was basically a league average offensive player. But he is a switch hitter, which is nice. He's a guy capable of playing several infield positions competently, and he's making the major league minimum with 2 option years left. So if we were to move on from a DePaula or a Mahez, that could open up a spot for Jarrett Woods. Last but not least, our shortstop, Elian Pena, who we signed to a slightly front-loaded 3-year contract this past offseason. He'll be making $11 million each of the next 2 years. We love his speed. We love his glove, although the bat is certainly not exceptional. Hit 238 this year with 13 doubles, 3 triples, 7 homers. Did steal 16 bases for us. The 70 WRC plus was ugly. The 1.7 WAR was fine. Fielding-wise, at shortstop, an above-average defensive shortstop when we look at his zone rating and defensive efficiency. I don't know that Pena will have the same type of trade value as a Mahez or a DePaula, and he is certainly a better defensive shortstop than a DePaula, and even probably slightly better defensively than Mahez at this point. Right now, I think we probably pencil in Pena as our shortstop just because he is the best defensive shortstop we've got in the major leagues. Also do like having that left-handed bat for a little more balance in the lineup, particularly if we end up moving on from the left-handed hitting outfielder Ted Miller this year. But when I start thinking about what this infield could look like next year, as I said, Stone's at first, Castillo's at second, Trent Kaysen is somewhere, Jarrett Woods very well could have a spot. And when we start talking like that, you can understand why with Pena, Mahez, and DePaula, it's hard to imagine all 3 of them are back next year. I think the question is whether it's only one of them back or perhaps 2 of them back with us next season. Regardless of whether we move on from DePaula, Mahez, or Pena, open up a decent amount of money if we move on from any of them to perhaps help us be a little more adventurous when free agency begins. And last but certainly not least, we'll talk about our outfielders. Really love the 5 guys we had in the outfield this year. Big decision for this upcoming offseason is going to be what to do with Ted Miller. Former second-round draft pick is set to become a free agent. His demand has gotten a little bit higher since the last time we checked in, looking for $23 million a year for 9 years. As I noted earlier, Miller, one of the more important left-handed hitters in our lineup, still a very good hitter against right-handed pitching, nothing special against lefties. Miller on the year hit 271 with 24 homers and 90 ribbies. put up a 122 WRC plus and a WAR of close to 2 for us. Not great defensively. He's been primarily a DH for us in recent years. Played 1 game at first and 11 games in left field, only 6 of which were starts this year. So he's really been a primary designated hitter for us. But taking a look at those batting splits, 118 WRC plus for us with 22 of his 24 home runs against right-handed pitching. So certainly would leave a little bit of a hole in the lineup against righties if we do move on from Mr. Miller. Chris Roy is a guy who's been up and down over the past few years. Still has 1 option year left for next year, so Lil D will likely remain part of the organization. 24 homers and 100 ribbies with a 329 average in AAA Albuquerque. He was ridiculously productive in 15 at-bats in the majors, going 8 for 15 with a double and a couple of home runs. Tend to think he'll probably begin the year in AAA, although if we do end up moving on from Miller, he certainly could make the 26-man roster out of spring training. Center fielder Anthony Pack Jr. Remains a uninspiring offensive player. The batting average dipped to 216 this year, and the on-base percentage was below 300. Did have 25 doubles and 12 homers, stole 50-plus bases for a 3rd consecutive season for us. Only a 74 WRC plus, but his WAR still close to 3. 16.2 zone rating, 1.079 defensive efficiency. He was the Gold Glove winner in center field in 2034 and 2035, and certainly looks like he's a strong candidate for another Gold Glove here in 2037. Set to make $9 million next year. The bat is nothing special, but he is a lefty hitter, which, as we noted, particularly if we move on from Miller, we may have a need for, and he remains an outstanding defensive center fielder. Phil Dingwell, with Miller in the lineup against righties and Mike Castro getting to play every day, got a lot less action this year than he did as a rookie, but he was more productive with the fact that we were able to play him primarily against left-handed pitching, where he is very deadly. 21 homers and 75 ribbies in just 315 at-bats is very impressive. Put up a 141 WRC plus and a 2.6 WAR. He's also a solid defensive player. Certainly will find his way into the lineup against lefties again next year. The question is whether he'll find his way into the lineup against righties if we perhaps move on from someone like Ted Miller. And last, but certainly not least, Kevin Roberts Jr., 5 tools, may have missed out on an opportunity to claim a 4th MVP award of his career when he missed the final couple weeks of the regular season with an injury. Fortunately, he was back and healthy by the time we got into the divisional series. Roberts Jr. on the year, 296 average, scored over 100 runs, drove in over 100 runs, 29 home runs, 41 stolen bases, just missed out on his 4th 30-30 season in the past 5 years. Led the league for the 2nd straight year in walks with 86. Also led the league in on-base percentage in OPS, putting up a 6.3 WAR for us. And, he also won the 8th playoff series most valuable player award of his incredible career. World Series MVP this year. He's now a 3-time World Series MVP, 6-time World Series champion, and a 3-time MVP winner. And he won't turn 30 until next July. So as I think about this roster, do we bring Ted Miller back is a big question. Out of DePaula, Mahez, and Pena, how many of them are back with us? Nate Harris versus Mike Gerard, what happens there? And then when we start thinking about the pitching, do we exercise our option on Wellington Herrera And do we consider moving on from Rich Hannon? To me, those are the big questions that I need to be thinking about over the very near term. Arbitration eligible players, obviously Hannon, Harris, Gerard, DePaula, and Mahez are the big decisions based on what I was just talking about. Presumably we'll be making offers to Barrera, Bell, and Russell to all come back, likely as our third, fourth, and fifth starters if Schultz is healthy and well. Big decision, as I noted, with Ted Miller. We do have the opportunity to submit a QO to him. Right now, I think I'm inclined to do that. Wouldn't be the worst thing in the world at his age if he came back to us for 1 year at $21.4 million with the money he's looking for. Conceivably, though, depending on how the next few weeks go, maybe we'll decide we don't want him back. To help inform some of those thoughts, let's take a look at the potential upcoming free agents here. And batting-wise, definitely some interesting players. The most interesting is the two-way player Connor Camo from the Chicago White Sox. Faced off against him in 4 consecutive World Series. On the mound, he was 14-10 with a 4.24 ERA this year, a 2.7 WAR. Taking a look at his pitching ratings, still looks like a more than competent major league pitcher. Nothing really special at this point, and we don't necessarily need him for the rotation. But he also remains a very productive offensive player. Led the American League with 108 runs scored this year, 26 homers, 83 ribbies, hit .270, ultimately put up a 130 WRC plus and a 4.7 WAR, both of which were the best he's ever done offensively over the course of his major league career. So certainly expect that Camo will be a big-time player to consider. Taking a look at those left-handed hitters, and Ted Miller, obviously on our team, is probably the premier left-handed hitter who's going to be on the market this offseason potentially. So certainly an argument that maybe we just bring him back, given that he remains a very productive offensive player against right-handed pitching. And some very interesting pitchers potentially on the market this offseason among the starters, although unfortunately 2 of them are injured. Jason Brabeck, bone chips in his elbow, ended his season just a little bit early. He was 11-6 with a 3.03 ERA. The 28-year-old lefty certainly has a very interesting looking pitching profile. Put up a 4.5 WAR this year. Is fragile physically, and with the depth of our rotation, perhaps a bit of a luxury item, but still a very talented player to be potentially hitting the free agent market. John Meadows, 31-year-old, suffered a torn labrum over a year ago. He was 6-10 with a 3.69 ERA for Miami before missing all of this season. Given his age and his profile and the amount he's likely to be looking for, even though he's a fine major league pitcher and probably would play pretty well in Colorado, hard to imagine with his likely price tag that will go after him. Mike Windsor, 28-year-old righty who's wrecked physically, some negative personality traits, 5-2 with a 3.27 ERA in 12 starts. Probably going to be looking for pretty good money, and probably not a direction that we are likely to go. 2 other starting pitchers who are scout views as a 55 overall. David Pacheco, 29-year-old, another guy with some negative personality traits, 10-5 with a 2.81 ERA this year. Good solid pitcher, but given the lack of stamina, the fact that he's really got a 2.5 pitch arsenal and those negative personality traits, and the fact that I don't see him necessarily being a huge upgrade to what we have at the back end of the rotation. Pacheco, to me, probably not a way to go. Eric Gordon, 29-year-old, another guy with some negative personality traits. Do love those extreme ground ball tendencies and the great control he has. 6-12 record with a 3.38 ERA this year and a 4 WAR for the Mets. Pitching in the rotation aren't a huge need, but vacuum cleaner Gordon certainly could be an interesting player to consider. So definitely potential for some relatively high-end free agents to be on the market this year. Whether or not they'll all end up making it to the market is still to be determined. We potentially have some money to spend and see about $22 million available at this point. And as I mentioned, when we start talking about some of our infielders, we start talking about a catcher, we start talking about the option that we have available on Mr. Herrera, there is an opportunity to open up some decent money and perhaps go after a big free agent. But we also have just about enough money to bring everybody back and bring Ted Miller back, which, given that we've won 5 in a row at this point, is also something that, although not necessarily that exciting for the offseason, is something that we still should probably consider. So those are my initial thoughts on the roster and some of the things that we'll be thinking about as we move through this offseason. Next time around, we will take a look at some of the top prospects in our organization. We'll take a look at some of the top prospects in baseball, some of our former players, and then it'll be time to start making some decisions on what we're going to do during this offseason. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.